exploring to communicate data. I'm very excited for this one. We'll be walking you through how to build a plot, how to go from I'm just exploring to this is something I could send to someone and it conveys meaningful information, and I think I can use this to convince them of something. And so all I'm going to do here is I'm going to load in some data that I have from my company's revenue. Now, this is not my company. This is a fake company. You can see here our revenue is in megabucks. So don't think that we're making $45 million in 2018 or anything like that in revenue. And so what draws your eye here in this plot? I would say, well, from 2015 to 2018 was just great, increase, great climbing, pretty steady. And then something happened in like mid 2018, our company just dropped, almost tanked. And then, 2019 came around and we started bounce back up a little bit. Who knows if we'll keep growing or if we're just going to kind of lower out, but at least that nasty drop is over. And so how can we go about exploring this just a little bit more visually? Well, what we can do is we can do something that's called a year-over-year analysis, where we can get the proportion change that we would expect from January 2019 as compared to January 2016, 2017, 2018, etc. And so I'm able to use complex layouts. I'm able to use this mosaic to convey that I want to draw my revenue, again, as we saw before, on the left-hand side. But on my right-hand side, I want 4 plots stacked on top of each other. This will be the year-over-year change from 2019 versus 2015, from 2019 versus 2016 to 2017, 18. And I am able to do this and space them out exactly the way that I want them. And I want to show you what this layout just looks like by itself. So here you can see I'm set up. This is just a little bit more exploratory analysis here. I'm drawing my revenue again. I have these 4 blank spots. How do I go about filling those 4 blank spots? Well, we encountered just a little bit of a data problem. We need to maybe I would resample this data to monthly, get the means, and then we'll need to pivot our data back out by month and year just to make it easily accessible by plotting mechanisms. And you'll note that this duality often comes up. My data is really easy to work with analytically, or my data is really easy to plot. You'll have to do transformations to get it to work either way. What I would recommend is doing all of your analysis and then trying your best to make it so in order to plot your data, all you need to do is subset it and minimally transform it. So do all of your analysis up to the step that you're ready to demonstrate it or show it, and then just make one final tweak to it so it's easier to plot, and then go ahead and plot it. I would not try to convert your data to some method that's ready to be plotted right away. And because that will make it hard to work with if you ever want to take that point as a stepping stone and maybe do another ad hoc analysis based on that. And so I can take this step where my data has been pivoted. I can calculate the differences. I can use just a little bit of pandas work here to really get that year-over-year analysis going. And so I want to show you what this looks like, and I'll just print this out for you, and I'll turn my plot off, just so we don't have to have it pop up again one more time for us. And so when we look at these diffs here, we see that a lot of them are negative, some of them are positive, but importantly, we saw a huge growth, right, from 2015 all the way up to about 2018. And you can see here that 2019, right, these are all compared relatively to our months, each month in 2019. You can see here that in 2015 and 2016, we did much better in 2019 than we did in either of those years. We kept growing. Whereas in 2017, okay, we started to lose, and then 2018 we lost a little bit in the early months, but then we started to bounce back, and we're doing better in these months of 2019 than we were in 2017 and in the later months of 2018. And so to plot this, you'll need to do just a little bit of setting. So I'm iterating over all of my years in my mosaic here, and then I'm going to just simply plot them. And let me turn my plot back on so we can visualize what we are doing. And so you can see here I've drawn bars on every single one of these plots that correspond to each month of the given year versus 2019. But we have a lot of noise here. There's overlapping labels, things don't look great, there's no legends on anything, and so we might need to spruce this up just a little bit. And so what we can do here is I can actually turn off some of this labeling, just make it aesthetically a little bit more pleasing. And I've turned off the spines on the top and the right because they're just visually kind of noisy. I've added Y labels to everything, which might be a little redundant, but I think it helps convey, right, what we're actually looking at here. And I would still consider this a very exploratory analysis, or visualization, I should say. But what we can also do is we can start plotting lines that are relative. These relative lines are very interesting because instead of using the data coordinates on my y-axis on the left, they're actually mapped to the data coordinates on the y-axis on the right. So not only am I able to visualize the absolute change of each month of 2016 versus 2019, 2015 versus 2019, but I can also see the relative percent difference of each of those months. And so I'm very readily able to extract meaning from these data. And I can use the plot on the left, the total company revenue, to make sure that what I'm seeing here on the right is actually aligned with the overall view of the data here on the left-hand side. And so we can do a few more sprucing up steps. I can actually, you'll see here that now nothing's labeled right in my plot. We have no x-axis of any kind. And so what I'm able to do is I can quickly just set tick labels just on the bottom plot, because we don't need it reiterated up through all of the plots. I know that the months go in order from 1 to 12, and if I label it as month once, I'm inferring that it'll be month the rest of the way up on all of the other plots. And so we're able to get a little bit more meaning out of this. Now I wanted to share with you something fun about Matplotlib, in case it hasn't been fun enough. I want to title this column of plots, and I want to say something like year-over-year analysis. How would I go about titling it? Well, I could try and get that uppermost set of axes out of my mosaic, and then I could add the title or get the current title and then append to it, make it a new line. That would be a good way of going about things. Or I can use this blended transform factory to manually add a title as a text object. And so what this blended transform factory does, just like our x and y axis with that get x axis transform, I can create a custom mapping of x and y coordinates. In this case, my x coordinates that I pass into any method that uses this transformation will be actually in axes coordinates, and the y value will be in figure coordinates. And what's great about this is I can capture the axes coordinates of my final axes because I iterated over them. And I can actually use this coordinate system to specify at 0.5, so halfway across my axes, and then 85% the way up my figure, I want to put a title. And so you can use this idea of transformations and coordinate systems to really seamlessly place text or place annotations absolutely anywhere you want on your graphic to add meaning. I'm saying this column of plots is a year-over-year analysis, so we're here to look at how each month of the current year compares to the previous year. I can even use this transformation again to create a meaningful legend. If I were to just draw a figure legend here, let's see what this looks like. Figure legend. We get that same issue, the issue that we've encountered all the time when we're plotting across multiple axes. I see just repeated information. And so what I can do here is I can capture the handles, right? And those are the parts of the legend that are patches, right? The little rectangles are their lines, their circles. And this is what Matplotlib transforms from the actual visualizations you see on the axes. I can actually capture the labels, and I can capture the handles. I can capture the labels, but I'm actually not interested in the labels from just the last one. I actually want to replace those labels. And then I can create a new legend on my figure. And I can give those same handles, right? It's just red and blue, or orange and blue rectangles, and that's what I want here. But I can also give them their own unique name. Now I need to be careful to make sure that these labels are in the same order as the handles. So I can always check, but in this case I know the ordering of my data. And I can also use a little bit of transformation to place this legend exactly where I want. But before we get into that, I want to show you what this legend just looks like without placing it. It just appears in the top right above my head here. And you'll see that, okay, we've made a much more aesthetically pleasing legend, but let's place it somewhere meaningful. I like placing it off to the right-hand side, just a little bit above halfway. I want to dial down that font size as well because it was a little large. And this may or may not be the best place for the legend. You could probably sneak it in just under the year-over-year title to the right of 2015 and have that convey as a legend that conveys information about all of these plots. But you can see here, you're able to create very powerful exploratory visualizations with Matplotlib. And then I can add something, a super title, to say, this is my revenue analysis. All right. Now, instead of looking at every single year over year, I'm done exploring the data. I really, really want to drill down into what that drop is. What happened in 2018 to 2019? And how did we fare versus our competitors? Well, if I want to drill down to what happened, I think that year-over-year analysis was a good way of helping us visualize things to see in January of 2019, were we doing better than 2018 or vice versa? And so I'm just interested in just that single comparison, so we can actually bring that back. But before I get to the year-over-year analysis, I want to discuss with you another way that we can visualize this data. And how we can do that is we can actually draw the differences, the average difference from each month onto our data, onto our plot here. And so I'll do that here for you. And so I just need to pass it the x and I pass it the y. And you can see here, diffs ax, you can see here that I will be plotting a bar plot of all the differences. You can see them just right down there, just in the bottom of my plot here. But it's almost impossible to see. Also, I've now pushed up my entire line graph just trying to visualize the difference from month to month. We have two different issues here. The first is that I've aggregated this data to occur on a monthly basis, but I've not increased the width of my bar, so they're coming off very small. The second issue is that when we're looking at month-over-month change, we're not expecting a very large change. That's the amount of change that occurs between one of these, any two of these points, consecutive points on this plot. And so we don't really want to be plotting these on the same axes. We want to plot them, I want to visualize them almost overlapping, but I don't want them to relay information to and from the same data space. And so what I'm able to do is I'm able to twin my x-axis such that I'm working, I have the same x-axis, but I'm working with a different y-axis, and you saw this above. And so what I'm able to do here is I can actually draw those bars in just a little bit more meaningful way. You can now see, okay, these bars are quite large, okay, but they only go from -3 to 3, and they really obscure that line that I wanted to see. And so how can we go about reducing that? Well, what we can do is we can set our x, we can actually change our x limit. So instead of going from -3 to 3 on that right-hand y-axis, I want it to go from -3 to 20. I really want to scale that axis down such that I squish all those bars to just the bottom of the plot. And when I do this, I'm not affecting the line. I'm not squishing the line. I'm not stretching the line. It's operating, the scaling is operating completely independently. And then now something I might take note of is that, okay, well, I've completely on my y-axis, it now goes from 0 to 20 on the right-hand side. I'm not using any value really that's greater than 3, so why not just set my ticks just to refer to -3, 0, and 3? And now we've completely eliminated the need for a right-hand side of this axis. We can spruce this up even more though. I want to highlight in blue where the values are positive, where the bars are positive, and orange where they're negative. Because when we look at these types of analyses, we're interested in, have we been gaining more money than we've been losing month over month? Well, from the line plot, you can tell overall that's true, but are there any really spans of bad months? And we see that large orange gap here that reiterates this idea of a huge decline month after month after month. And we're just able to visualize this in a different way where we can see the change from each month instead of having to try and interpolate the slope of a line using our brain. What we can also do is we can dial down the alpha on these bars such that they're not as strong and present. We want that line to really be the main takeaway of this graphic, and the bars are just kind of supplementary information. We can also highlight or outline these bars in just a nice little black outline such that they're very easily seen. They stand out, but they're just a little faded in terms of their opacity. And so I will also, I'll show that to you in a moment, but I can also set my X label and I can set my, move my X label. And so what this looks like is if I change my X, or my Y label, I should say, on my right-hand side to monthly delta, I could probably come up with something a little more descript, but you'll see that that Y label is really far away from my axes, and it's also in the center still of my figure, or of my set of axes here. What I want is actually to move this Y label down to the bottom so it's close to where the meaningful area where all of my data exists. And that's what I'm able to do with this set label chords. I can actually move that label down to a more meaningful position. I can mix and match and play with this as I see fit. Next, I want to draw attention to that drop in my revenue. And so what I'm able to do here is use an AXV span in order to highlight this is the portion of my data that I'm going to focus my analysis on. And I can I can redo that year-over-year analysis that we saw above, so I'll just go ahead and do that. And so now you'll see here in the lower right-hand corner, let me redraw that. In the lower right-hand corner, we have our revenue year over year. It's behind me. And what I then want to do, I want to also reinstantiate that year-over-year relative difference line that we saw earlier. And so I have that nice red line that shows me the percent change for each of these months. Next, I have data on a competitor. The whole point of this analysis was what happened in 2018 and did we fare any better than the similar companies around us? So if I read in my competitor's data and I save it, that's what I've been saving that top right axis for, and I then plot it to that top right axis, we can see, okay, definitely got to fix up the labels here, but we can see that our competitors, I don't know what color they are, but both lines are declining. I'm assuming that everyone struggled in this time. For reference, I am the blue line in this plot, and my competitor is the orange line, but we'll set up a legend to make that very visible. And so I can go ahead and I can fix this x-axis by using the major formatter and major locator, and you see I get much better, much nicer labels here in this case. And then I can add a legend to my figure, or to my axes here for the competitor comparison. But what I still don't like is the competitors, I'm focused on the drop, and just because my competitor is a many megabytes company, and I'm only a small megabytes company, about half their revenue, well, it kind of really trounces out what the relative difference is for us. I'm curious, did our competitor suffer worse, right, through this 2018 decline than my company did? Who's faring better? And so what we don't want to do is plot the raw revenue values. We want to plot the scaled revenue values, and how we'll do that is we'll simply just scale the actual values themselves by dividing it by the max from our area of interest, this maxloc dot to minloc. And when we do that, we see that our lines actually line up much neater. I have the legend indicating that my company's in blue and the competitor's in orange. You can actually see that the drop didn't hit my company as bad, as hard as it hit the competitor. We dropped it down to about 70% of our total value, whereas our competitor dropped, to about 60% or 62 or 3%. One last thing that I want to share with you is that I'd say this plot looks decent, right? It's just a little bit noisy. There's a lot going on. And what I want to show is that we can use some preset defaults that Matplotlib has. If you're a fan of the seaborn color style, you can actually use it and have Matplotlib style your plots for you using some of seaborn's defaults, not all of them. That's why I specified seaborn-dark grid. And so what we get here is, instead of a white background on all of my plots with all of my spines, you get no spines on any of your plots. You get this nice dark gridded background. And so you can start to see here that we're really working with the aesthetics of our plot. We're using it to reduce the amount of visual noise that we're taking in and increase some and add some meaning into our figure. I can add a super title 2018 drop analysis, and I can even add remarks. If I were to do this analysis, I would usually want my thoughts, my summary, to be paired with it, and not in the body of an email with just a figure attached, right? I want someone to be able to forward this figure to their friend, to their colleague, and say, look at what Cameron found. Look at what happened with our company in 2018. And so I can actually add a text just below my title with just a brief summary of what I found. I can put this anywhere I want. And obviously, this is not something that you would automate. This is something you would have to analyze and interpret first. But that's what we're doing with these communicative visualizations. We are performing analyses, we're performing exploratory visualizations, and then we're figuring out, okay, what happened here, and what about it do I want to tell someone? And from all of this exploration, all of this visualization, we can see that there was a significant drop in revenues in 2018. However, we seem to have fared better than our competitor despite their overall larger size. And that is how you can go using Matplotlib from a series of exploratory visualizations to a coherent communicative visualization that's aesthetically pleasing and conveys a meaningful message.